Welcome to the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast, where we make it our mission to challenge, question, and inspire you to do the same.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about the recent climate change protests against Shell in London. We'll be interviewing a science teacher here about Vernon about oil drilling and how it impacts our environment.
My name is Sophia Molinari.
I'm Jonathan Dugan.
I'm Henry Irvin.
And my name is John Parks.
And welcome to the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast. So this all started with a typhoon in the Philippines, and typhoons had happened before in the Philippines. This had been because the Philippines are very, very affected by climate change. They're one of the most affected places in the world.
Yeah, because they're just a bunch of islands.
Yeah, so this typhoon specifically hit them really, really hard.
Which typhoon was it? Like, were they hit with multiple typhoons?
I mean, over the years, they've been hit with, many typhoons, but this one was, specifically...
Like a super typhoon?
Yeah, pretty much.
As of recent, they've been hit by a couple of typhoons, and at this point, they're ready to retaliate, and they chose Shell as their target.
Yeah, Shell is one of the main producers and one of the main gas companies and oil drillers that lead to climate change, so this is why they pick Shell. And Shell's headquarters is in London, which is where these protests are happening.
So what is Greenpeace as a company?
Greenpeace is a company of activists focused on a greener Earth, and so they are hosting protests in London.
Yeah, they're trying to take down Shell because they don't believe that what Shell is doing is very fair to the environment, and they're trying to stop them.
Yeah, Shell contributes to a lot of the climate change that's happening around the world because of how much oil drilling that they're doing.
And with the oil drilling, they're giving it to like cars and factories that are doing more pollution. Drilling the oil, they pretty much they pollute, and then they give what they get from polluting to other things that pollute.
Yeah, and they basically Greenpeace started these protests. They started organizing these protests outside of Shell in London at the Shell headquarters, and they took the belongings from that were wrecked in the typhoon in the Philippines. They put them in glass boxes, filled them with water, and then smashed them as a way of showing this is what happened, and showing people visually and making them feel how the people in the Philippines felt when their belongings got ruined.
Yeah, and these boxes were flooded with water to show how they're showing the drenches of flood water that's been coming down.
The broken glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, they broke the glass to the cages.
I read an article where it was saying how the protesters wanted to make the headquarters feel what they felt when it came to the flooding, so that's the main reason why they broke the glass and the water flushed against their headquarters.
Yeah, after all the glass was broken, they swept it into the entrance of Shell and just left it there to show Shell what they really wanted, to make their vision heard, their impact.
Some of the deeper motives of Greenpeace, right? You have the typhoons, but there's also a deeper meaning in human rights violations, right? At that point, these big climate effects that Shell is causing could be considered a human rights violation with how they're affecting the Philippines.
Yeah, and the protesters demand, say, hey, if you're causing this climate change, you're causing an effect. You should, since you caused climate change to worsen and it affected our family, our homes being destroyed, you should pay for it.
JSO is another organization focused on climate activism. Their name stands for Just Stop Oil, and they've been getting in some trouble recently. Across about a year, over 16 JSO members have been arrested for their protests, right? They've been stirring things up with their protests, including throwing oil and a can of tomato soup, I think, onto a painting of Van Gogh to symbolize the oil of Shell and how that's affecting climate change. And they've been getting jailed, and there's a lot of controversy about their sentences.
How does this relate to this protest? How does this relate to Greenpeace and this specific idea?
So they're really going after the same goal here, right? Climate change is hurting a lot of people, and Shell is a big perpetrator in that area. And so they're really going after Shell so they can stop producing all these emissions and help all the vulnerable areas of climate change in the world, just like the Philippines.
Got it. That makes sense.
Hello, what is your name? What do you do here at Mount Vernon?
Hi, my name is Lisa Laracy, and I am an AP environmental science teacher and also an oceanography teacher here at Mount Vernon.
Have you ever heard of this protest before we told you?
I have not heard of this particular one before you mentioned it to me.
Have you heard of other climate protests?
Yes, I've heard of lots of climate protests. Whenever I turn on the news, I see something in many locations, whether it's in the U.S. in coal or overseas with gasoline.
How much of global warming are car emissions?
Just from the exhaust of a car themselves? I don't know the statistics right offhand, but certainly in the United States, where most people drive and most households have 2+ cars, that's a lot of emissions every day on the road. Especially here in Atlanta, when you know about the Atlanta traffic, every time a car is on the freeway or idling in a parking lot, not turning itself off, waiting on people to get into the car, that is producing emissions. So if you factor in all the people, especially here in Atlanta, driving, all of those are contributors to greenhouse gases in the form of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and other harmful emissions.
How does global warming affect the events that are happening around the world, like the weather events? How do
Natural disasters.
The scale of weather.
Yeah, that's a big question. As we know, personally here in Georgia, we just had snow flurries yesterday and it's already late February. So we should be entering spring, but as of today, we have 18 degrees, right? So even here in Georgia, we're having these extreme cold events. Just like last month, we had snowing in Florida and South Carolina on the beaches. We've also had hurricane season that happens sooner and later and extending those. And in California, obviously, the droughts and the wildfires have extended. So all of these are directly related to the warming of the earth and changing our weather patterns.
Yeah, and the oil drilling does play a big role in this, right?
The oil drilling is twofold, actually. First is when you actually drill to get the oil out of the ground, which is called fracking, which they use heavy equipment to drill a deep hole to get these natural gas and oil from the ground. Once you drill into the earth, you are releasing carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, which is bad. Just bringing up that carbon that's been down there for millions of years, you're releasing it. So all of that is going into our atmosphere. And then what they do with the oil and gas, they distribute it and then it goes into our cars. And then the combustion in our cars puts it into our atmosphere once again. So it's like a double whammy, if you want to say.
Do you believe that gas companies like Shell can be held accountable for rising concerns of climate change?
100%. Shell companies have an obligation to their stakeholders, and they're in it to make money. They're not in it to be mindful of what's happening with our world.
What are some causes to these superstorms? So we know that there was a typhoon in the Philippines. Multiple typhoons in the Philippines. How specifically is climate change affecting this?
Climate change affects everything. When you think about the droughts in California, what does that really mean? That means there's not enough of condensation in the atmosphere for it to rain in certain parts of the area. So this can be contributed to the earth warming, and the increase in CO2 has really been detrimental to our carbon cycle and our water cycle.
After having our interview with Ms. Laracy, we learned a bunch of information about climate change, specifically about how oil affects climate change. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. like just drilling for the oil, and these like oil holes, like they are the what releasing carbon. They're pretty much releasing carbon, and they're
It's going into the atmosphere and affecting the environment by like warming the ocean and making it so we don't get the oxygen that we need from.
It's preventing the heat from the sun to escape our atmosphere, and it's building up on the surface, and that's causing weather to get stronger.
Yeah, this is what leads to these typhoons, this change, and the oceans and the earth just can't keep up, which is what these people are protesting for. They want change in carbon emissions, they want change in gas and oil.
They want companies to be held responsible and fix what they caused.
So this doesn't keep happening.
Yes, and the problem doesn't get worse.
The protests are driving in the fact that it's climate change that are directly affecting these people in these countries in the Philippines. Thank you for tuning into today's episode on the podcast. If you liked it, please check out more on the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast channel.